At my son-in-law's vice president promotion party, he said into the microphone. My mother-in-law only came because she heard there would be good food. I smiled, my face muscles tightening with effort. The spotlight burned against my skin as laughter rippled through the crowd. When Monday morning came, I cancelled the mortgage check without a moment's hesitation. My heart pounded with newfound resolve. I spent 3 hours getting ready for Nathan's vice president promotion party. At 67, it takes longer to look presentable than it used to. I meticulously applied my makeup, my hands working with practiced precision as I styled my silver hair. I chose my navy blue dress, the one Elizabeth always claimed made me look elegant. I wanted my daughter to feel proud of me, though a voice inside questioned why I still craved her approval. The venue was extravagant, a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Boston skyline that practically shouted wealth and success. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting prismatic patterns across the polished floors. Waiters in crisp white uniforms glided between guests carrying trays of champagne. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner, their melodies almost drowned by the buzz of ambitious conversations. Everything screamed success just the way Nathan had always envisioned for himself. "Mom, you made it!" Elizabeth rushed toward me, her perfume enveloping me as she air-kissed both my cheeks. She looked stunning in her black designer dress, though I noticed tension lines around her eyes, her smile strained and not quite reaching them. "Of course I came, dear." "I wouldn't miss Nathan's big moment," I replied, squeezing her arm affectionately. Elizabeth nodded, but her eyes were already scanning the room over my shoulder. "The Robertsons just arrived," she said, stepping back. "I need to greet them right away." "Nathan's boss, you know. Help yourself to something to eat, Mom." Her attention had already shifted before she finished speaking. I wandered through the crowded room, exchanging hollow pleasantries with strangers who barely made eye contact with me. My chest tightened with each forced smile. I recognized a few faces from family gatherings, but most were Nathan's colleagues, younger professionals with sharp suits and even sharper ambitions that seemed to cut through the air around them. Finding a quiet corner with a good view of the stage, I settled in, clutching my untouched champagne. My thoughts drifted to all those mortgage checks I'd written over the past 3 years, each one bleeding away a portion of my security. "Just until Nathan gets established," Elizabeth had pleaded when they found their dream home, her eyes wide with that same look she'd used since childhood. "We can't quite afford it yet, but his career is taking off. It's just temporary, Mom, I promise." The memory of her words twisted in my stomach like a knife. That temporary arrangement had transformed into 36 monthly checks of $20,400 each, drawn from my late husband's life insurance meant to secure my retirement. The weight of secrecy pressed against my chest, as I'd never told anyone I was helping them. Elizabeth had insisted it would humiliate Nathan if people knew. Pride always his pride. The room suddenly hushed as Nathan took the stage, champagne glass held high in his hand, his easy confidence filling the space like a physical presence. My son-in-law had always been charismatic, a quality that had initially blinded me to the small cruelties. The dismissive glances, the way he spoke over me at family dinners. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," Nathan began, his smile dazzling under the spotlights. "This promotion has been years in the making." I smiled, genuinely happy for his success. Perhaps now they could finally take over their own mortgage payments. My shoulders relaxed slightly at the thought. "I see many faces who've supported me on this journey," he continued. "My bosses who recognize my potential." He nodded toward a table of executives who raised their glasses. "My colleagues who've pushed me to excel." More acknowledging nods around the room. "And of course my beautiful wife, Elizabeth." Elizabeth beamed, raising her glass as the crowd applauded. Nathan's eyes found me in the corner and something shifted in his expression. A slight smirk pulled at the corner of his mouth, sending a chill down my spine. "I see my mother-in-law Marie is here too." A spotlight suddenly blinded me. Heat rushed to my face as all eyes turned my direction. My heart hammered against my ribs. "My mother-in-law only came because she heard there would be good food," Nathan continued, his voice playful but with a cutting edge I recognized all too well. "Certainly better than what she cooks at home." Laughter rippled through the room. Not kind laughter, but the uncomfortable kind that erupts when someone has said something inappropriate but holds enough power that people feel obligated to respond. My smile froze on my face, becoming a mask I couldn't drop. 3 years of mortgage payments. 36 checks written in secret to preserve his precious pride. My fingers trembled around my champagne glass. And this was how he saw me, a greedy old woman who showed up only for free meals. Elizabeth was laughing too, though her eyes darted nervously to gauge my reaction. She knew. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She knew exactly what that comment meant, and what it revealed about how Nathan talked about me when I wasn't present. The spotlight mercifully moved away. Nathan continued his speech, but I could no longer hear the words over the roaring in my ears. Like ocean waves crashing against rocks, people around me avoided eye contact, a few offering sympathetic glances that only deepened my humiliation. When the speech ended and the crowd dispersed back to mingling, I quietly gathered my purse and shawl, my movements slow and deliberate despite the storm raging inside me. No one noticed as I slipped out the door, took the elevator down and called a taxi, my voice surprisingly steady as I gave my address. The next morning, sitting at my kitchen table with my checkbook open, I stared at the blank check I'd been about to fill out. Nathan's words echoed in my mind crystal clear despite the champagne I'd consumed. For the first time, I saw with painful clarity what I had become to them. Not a mother, not family, just an ATM with grey hair and a law degree they considered obsolete. My hand didn't shake at all as I wrote "cancelled" across the check for this month's mortgage payment, the red ink stark against the pale blue background. Then I opened my phone and scheduled a meeting with my financial advisor for Monday. The old Marie would have kept writing those checks, kept smiling through the humiliation, swallowing her pride along with her pain. But something cracked inside me last night, and something stronger was emerging from the broken pieces. As an attorney, I'd once defended others' rights. It was time to defend my own. The phone rang at 7:43 a.m. Tuesday morning, jolting me from my first peaceful sleep in months. Elizabeth's name flashed on the screen, sending a flutter of anxiety through my chest. I took a deep breath before answering, steadying my voice. "What the hell, Mom?" Her voice crackled with fury, sharp as broken glass. The mortgage payment bounced. The bank called Nathan this morning. I sat up, adjusting my pillows against the headboard, taking my time before responding. "Good morning to you too, Elizabeth." I kept my voice calm, drawing on years of courtroom experience. "This isn't funny." Nathan is absolutely livid. "We have a payment history to maintain. Do you realize what this does to our credit score?" Her words tumbled out, edged with panic. I looked out my bedroom window at the maple tree I'd planted with John 7 years ago. Its leaves were just beginning to turn golden in the early autumn light, reminding me of the cycles of life, of endings and beginnings. "I cancelled the check," I said evenly, feeling a strange sense of liberation in saying the words aloud. There was a moment of stunned silence before Elizabeth's voice returned, lower now, controlled. "You what? Why would you do that?" "I think you know why." My voice remained steady, surprising me with its strength. "Mom, if this is about Nathan's joke at the party." Her tone shifted, becoming defensive. "Was it a joke, Elizabeth? Because jokes are meant to make people laugh. I didn't find it particularly amusing to be humiliated in front of a room full of strangers." My heart pounded, but I didn't back down. Elizabeth sighed dramatically. "You're overreacting." Nathan was just trying to lighten the mood. That's his sense of humor. You know how he gets when he's nervous. Making fun of the woman who's been paying your mortgage for 3 years is his sense of humor. I felt a flush of anger rise from my chest to my face. How amusing. Another silence stretched between us, longer this time. When Elizabeth spoke again, her voice had shifted to the coaxing tone she'd used since childhood whenever she wanted something. Sweet as honey, but just as sticky. "Mom, please." It was just one bad joke. He didn't mean anything by it. I closed my eyes, memories flooding back with startling clarity. Nathan commenting on my outdated clothes at Thanksgiving. Nathan asking if I'd finally figured out how to use a smartphone at Christmas. Nathan wondering aloud if I was still capable of driving on my birthday. Each memory stung afresh. "This isn't just about the party, Elizabeth," I said, my voice hardening. "It's about respect, or rather the complete lack of it. So you're punishing us financially because your feelings got hurt?" Her voice rose again, indignant. "That's incredibly petty, Mom." The old Marie would have crumbled at that accusation. She would have apologized profusely, written a new check, maybe even added extra to make up for the inconvenience. But the woman who walked out of that party 2 nights ago wasn't the same person anymore. I felt steel in my spine where there had once been only the desire to please. "I'm not punishing anyone," I explained, my legal training surfacing in my methodical response. I'm simply stopping something I should have never started. Nathan makes six figures, you work full-time. You're both in your 40s. There's no logical reason I should be paying your mortgage. We were counting on that money. Elizabeth's control was slipping, panic edging into her voice. We have the villa booking in Tuscany next month, and we just ordered new furniture for the sunroom. I felt a chill spread through my chest, a cold realization that froze me momentarily. You've been using my mortgage payments to fund luxury vacations and furniture. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. That's not, I didn't mean. Elizabeth stumbled over her words, caught in her own admission. We needed that money for the mortgage, so we could afford other things. That's how budgets work, Mom. I see. My voice had gone quiet. And here I thought I was helping you keep a roof over your heads, not subsidizing your European vacations. You're being cruel. Elizabeth's voice broke theatrically. After everything we've done for you. That stopped me short, genuine confusion replacing my anger. What exactly have you done for me, Elizabeth? We invite you to all our events, she stammered. We call you on holidays. Nathan fixed your garbage disposal last year. I almost laughed at the absurdity of her response, the inequality of our exchange suddenly crystal clear. And in exchange, I've given you over $86,000. The line went quiet. I could hear Elizabeth breathing, probably struggling to find another angle to manipulate me. I pictured her pacing in her designer kitchen, the one I'd helped pay for. Mom, she finally said, her voice honey-sweet again. I know you're upset. Let's not let one misunderstanding ruin our relationship. Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? We can talk this through like adults. I'm not coming to dinner, Elizabeth, I stated firmly. And I'm not writing any more checks. You can't just cut us off like this. All pretense of sweetness vanished, replaced by raw fury. What kind of mother abandons her family? That word abandon shit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I was back in that rooftop restaurant, frozen in the spotlight, while strangers laughed at Nathan's joke. My chest tightened painfully. I haven't abandoned anyone, I said quietly, fighting to keep my voice from shaking. I've just stopped being used. Dad would be so disappointed in you. My late husband's memory was her final weapon, one she knew would wound me deepest. I felt the blade twist, but something unexpected happened. Instead of pain, I felt a strange clarity, as if John was suddenly in the room with me, his reassuring presence at my side. No, Elizabeth? John would be disappointed that his daughter is treating his wife this way. I felt certainty in every word. I heard a sharp intake of breath, then the sound of a door slamming in the background. Nathan wants to talk to you, Elizabeth said tersely. Tell Nathan I said congratulations again on his promotion, I replied, surprising myself with my composed tone. Now he can finally afford his own mortgage. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. I knew this wasn't over. They wouldn't let go of their cash cow without a fight. But for the first time since John died, I felt like myself again, the confident attorney who once commanded respect in courtrooms. The phone immediately rang again. I turned it off and went to make a cup of tea, my movements deliberate and calm. Whatever storm was coming, I would face it on my terms, not theirs. My legal training hadn't abandoned me after all. 3 days of blessed silence ended when my doorbell rang Thursday afternoon. I peered through the peephole to find my son Thomas standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. Unlike Elizabeth, Thomas had always been the peacemaker in the family. Hey, Mom, he said when I opened the door, leaning in to kiss my cheek. His familiar scent of mint and wool comforted me. Got time for coffee? I studied his face, so much like his father's, and saw the tension around his eyes. My stomach tightened with concern. Elizabeth called you, didn't she? Thomas sighed, running a hand through his sandy hair. Can we talk inside? In the kitchen, I busied myself making coffee while Thomas sat at the table fidgeting with a coaster. My son had never been good at hiding his feelings, his emotions always visible on his face like words on a page. Elizabeth's pretty upset, he finally said as I set a steaming mug in front of him. I imagine she is, I replied, taking the seat across from him. Did she tell you why? Thomas nodded, his eyes troubled. She said you cut them off because of some joke Nathan made. She thinks you're overreacting. And what do you think? I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. He stared into his coffee, avoiding my gaze. I think there's probably more to the story. I told him everything, my words flowing freely now that the dam had broken. The 3 years of mortgage payments, the countless loans that were never repaid, and finally the public humiliation at the promotion party. Thomas's face darkened as I spoke, his jaw tightening visibly. That was a shitty thing for Nathan to say, he said when I finished. Anger flashed in his eyes, so unlike his usual gentle demeanor. Yes, it was, I agreed, wrapping my hands around my mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. But it was also revealing. It showed me exactly what they think of me. Still, Mum, cutting off the mortgage payments without warning, Thomas hesitated. That's pretty harsh. I raised an eyebrow, feeling a flicker of disappointment. Did you know I was paying their mortgage? He had the grace to look embarrassed, a flush creeping up his neck. Elizabeth mentioned something once about you helping them out. Did she mention I've given them over $86,000? I asked pointedly. Thomas's eyes widened in shock. Jesus, Mom. No, she definitely didn't mention that part. And did you know they've been using that money to fund vacations to Tuscany and new furniture? My voice remained steady, factual rather than accusatory. He shook his head, looking increasingly uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. No, I had no idea. Thomas, I'm not cutting them off to be cruel, I explained, leaning forward. I'm cutting them off because I've finally realized I'm being used. The pain of the admission sat heavily in my chest. My son was quiet for a long moment, processing what I'd told him. Elizabeth said Dad would have wanted you to help them. His tone made it clear he was repeating her words, not endorsing them. The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. Your father would have wanted his grown children to stand on their own 2 feet, I said firmly. He worked hard so I would be taken care of in my old age, not so Elizabeth and Nathan could have Italian vacations. Thomas nodded slowly, then hesitated, conflict evident on his face. There's something else you should know. My stomach tightened with apprehension. What is it? Nathan. He talks about you sometimes when you're not around. Thomas wouldn't meet my eyes, staring instead at his coffee cup. Not very nicely, I'm afraid. What does he say? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Just jokes about how you're always asking about their finances, how you're stingy with your money despite having so much of it. I felt like I'd been slapped, the sting of betrayal sharp and sudden. Stingy? I've given them $86,000. I know, Mom, Thomas said quickly. I didn't know about all that until today. What else does he say? I pressed, needing to hear the full truth now. Thomas's discomfort was palpable, his shoulders tense. It's not important. It is to me, I insisted, my voice firm. He sighed heavily. He calls you the Bank of Marie. Says you're keeping track of every penny so you can hold it over their heads someday. He also makes comments about your legal knowledge being outdated. Each word was a knife twist cutting deeper than I expected. And Elizabeth, does she correct him when he says these things? Though I already knew the answer, Thomas's silence told me everything I needed to know. The doorbell rang again, saving him from having to respond aloud. I opened it to find my neighbour Olivia holding a casserole dish, her familiar smile a welcome sight. Marie, I made too much lasagna. Thought you might like some. The aroma of tomato and herbs wafted toward me. I invited her in, genuinely grateful for the interruption. Olivia had been my friend for 20 years, a straight-talking widow who never minced words. After quick introductions, Olivia settled at the table while I made her coffee. Thomas, clearly relieved by the buffer, asked about her garden. It's coming along nicely, though not as lovely as your mother's, Olivia replied, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. Actually, Marie, I've been meaning to talk to you about something I overheard at the Miller's barbecue last month. I tensed, sensing what was coming, my hand stilling on the coffee pot. That son-in-law of yours was there, Nathan, right? Handsome fellow, but my word, what a mouth on him. Olivia shook her head disapprovingly. He was telling some folks by the drinks table about your pension, calling you, and I apologize for repeating this, an ATM with outdated legal knowledge. Thomas looked stricken, colour draining from his face. He didn't. I'm afraid he did, Olivia confirmed, her expression grim. Said something about how handy it was having a mother-in-law with a fat retirement account and no one to spend it on but herself. Also mentioned how your legal expertise might have been sharp once but was now obsolete. The room fell silent. I stood at the counter, my back to them, fighting to control the emotions surging through me, hurt, anger, betrayal, all swirling together like a storm. Mom, I'm so sorry, Thomas finally said, his voice strained. I had no idea it was that bad. I turned around, surprised to find I felt more resolved than hurt, as if the final piece of a puzzle had fallen into place. Well, now we all know exactly where we stand. Olivia reached over and patted my hand, her touch comforting. You know what my Harold used to say? When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I nodded, suddenly grateful for Nathan's public joke. Without it, I might have continued writing those checks for years, blind to the contempt behind their smiling faces. Thomas stayed for another hour, our conversation turning to his teaching job and his daughter Sophie. When he left, he hugged me tightly, his embrace conveying what words couldn't. "I'll talk to Elizabeth," he promised. "This isn't right." I watched him drive away, not holding out much hope for a change of heart. Elizabeth had always been stubborn, and she'd chosen a husband who matched her in that regard. That night, I pulled out the box of financial records I'd been keeping meticulously for years, my legal training evident in the organised documentation. Loan after loan, check after check, all neatly documented with dates and amounts. Some for the mortgage, some for emergencies that somehow always coincided with luxury purchases. As I leafed through the papers, a cold realization settled over me like frost. This wasn't just about one insulting joke. This wasn't even about money. This was about years of being taken advantage of by the people who should have cared for me most. It was time to close the Bank of Marie permanently, and my legal background would help me do exactly that. I spent the next morning at Coastal Credit Union with Jasmine, the financial advisor who had helped me manage my money since John's passing. She peered at me over her glasses as I explained the situation, her dark eyes shrewd and assessing. "Let me get this straight, Marie," she said, her voice carrying a note of concern. "You've been paying your daughter and son-in-law's mortgage for 3 years without telling anyone." I nodded, feeling embarrassment burn in my cheeks now that I was saying it aloud. The former attorney in me recognized how foolish I'd been. "And you want to know how much you've given them in total?" "Yes," I confirmed, straightening my shoulders. "I've kept records, but I want to make sure I haven't missed anything." Jasmine typed rapidly on her keyboard, her lips thinning as she reviewed my accounts. My stomach knotted with apprehension at her expression. "Marie, there are numerous withdrawals here, not just the monthly mortgage payments." She turned the monitor so I could see, pointing at the screen with a manicured nail. Besides the $2,400 monthly mortgage payments, there were dozens of other withdrawals, each one bringing back a sharp memory. $5,000 for Elizabeth's car repair, $3,200 for Nathan's dental work, $7,500 for a kitchen emergency, $4,800 for roof repair. "Do you remember authorizing all these?" Jasmine asked gently. My stomach clenched as I nodded, the weight of my own naivety pressing down on me. Each payment had come with a desperate phone call, a tearful explanation of why they needed the money immediately. Each time, I'd written a check without question, my legal training apparently abandoned when it came to my own family. Marie adding everything up, the mortgage payments and these other withdrawals. "You've given them approximately $127,000 over the past 3 years. The number hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath from my lungs. I knew it was substantial, but hearing the total made me lightheaded, blood rushing in my ears. My fingers gripped the edge of Jasmine's desk. "That's about a third of your retirement savings," Jasmine said, her voice gentle but concerned. "And considering the current market conditions, this level of withdrawal is severely impacting your long-term security." I gripped the edge of her desk harder, trying to steady myself as the room seemed to tilt slightly. "I had no idea it was that much," I whispered, shame coursing through me. As a former attorney who had once advised clients on financial matters, how had I been so blind to my own situation? Jasmine removed her glasses, her expression softening with compassion. "Marie, I've been meaning to talk to you about this pattern for a while. This level of financial support isn't sustainable for someone on a fixed income. At this rate, you'll deplete your savings within 7 years." 7 years. I was only 67. With modern medicine, I could easily live another 20 years or more. The reality of my situation crashed down on me like a collapsing building, burying me in the rubble of my own poor decisions. What should I do? My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "First, you need to stop the withdrawals, which you've already done." Jasmine nodded approvingly. "Second, you might want to consider talking to an elder law attorney about protecting your assets." "Do you think that's necessary?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. My legal background had taught me enough about asset protection to recognize the danger. Jasmine hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Marie, when family members become accustomed to accessing someone's funds this way, they rarely stop willingly. They often feel entitled to continue, sometimes even escalating their demands." I thought of Elizabeth's reaction on the phone, Her immediate leap to accusations and emotional manipulation rather than understanding or gratitude for what I'd already done. "I'll make an appointment," I said firmly, my resolve strengthening. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the document Jasmine had printed out. A complete record of every dollar I'd given to Elizabeth and Nathan. The numbers seemed to swim before my eyes, black figures marching across the page in damning formation. It was an appalling amount, far more than I'd realized. No wonder they'd become so comfortable with their lifestyle. I'd been subsidizing it all along, enabling their financial irresponsibility. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Elizabeth, arms crossed, foot tapping impatiently on my front porch. My heart raced, but I took a deep breath before opening the door. "We need to talk," she announced, pushing past me without waiting for an invitation, the scent of her expensive perfume trailing behind her. I followed her into the living room where she paced like a caged animal, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor. "Thomas says you think we've been using you for money," she accused, her voice sharp with indignation. "Haven't you?" I asked, simply standing my ground. Elizabeth stopped pacing, her face flushing with anger. "We've had some financial difficulties. You offered to help? Did I offer or did you ask?" I challenged, picking up Jasmine's printout. "Did I offer to give you $127,000? Elizabeth blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "It can't possibly be that much." "It is," I stated, my voice level. "I have the records right here, all documented and verified by my financial advisor." She regained her composure quickly, her eyes narrowing. "So what? You're wealthy, Mom. Dad left you well taken care of. What else are you going to spend it on?" "Perhaps my own retirement," I suggested, feeling anger rise in my chest. "Medical care when I'm older? Or just things that bring me joy rather than funding your and Nathan's extravagant lifestyle?" Elizabeth's expression hardened, her mask of reasonableness slipping. "This is about Nathan's stupid joke, isn't it? You're punishing us because your feelings got hurt." "This isn't about punishment," I countered. "My legal training helping me remain logical in the face of her emotional tactics. It's about realizing I've been taken advantage of for years." "Taken advantage of?" Elizabeth laughed bitterly, the sound like breaking glass. "You've lived in this house for 40 years. Your mortgage is paid off. You have no expenses except your gardening hobby and basic living costs. And that entitles you to my savings?" I asked, genuinely curious about her reasoning. "We're family," she insisted, as if that explained everything. "Family helps each other." "Where was that family spirit when Nathan was mocking me at his party?" I challenged, my voice gaining strength. "Where was it when he called me an ATM with outdated legal knowledge at the Miller's barbecue?" Elizabeth's eyes widened slightly, confirming she knew about that comment. My heart sank further at the realization. "He was just joking around," she dismissed with a wave of her hand. "You're being too sensitive." "No, Elizabeth," I said firmly. "People joke about things they find funny. Nathan clearly finds financial exploitation amusing. As a lawyer, I once prosecuted cases like this." "Exploitation? That's ridiculous," she scoffed. "We were going to pay you back." I raised an eyebrow skeptically. "When?" she faltered, her confidence wavering. When we were more financially stable." "You make over $200,000 a year between the two of you," I pointed out. "You have a mortgage on a house you could never afford without my help. You take luxury vacations to Tuscany and buy designer furniture. When exactly were you planning to become financially stable?" The front door opened and Nathan walked in without knocking, his face flushed with anger. My muscles tensed at his intrusion. "There you are," he said to Elizabeth. "I told you not to come here alone." "I don't recall inviting either of you," I said calmly, refusing to be intimidated in my own home. Nathan turned to me, his charm nowhere in evidence. "Look, Marie, this has gone on long enough. We need that mortgage payment." I held up the financial document, my hand steady. "Did you know you and Elizabeth have taken $127,000 from me in the last 3 years?" He glanced at the paper unimpressed. "So what? You're not exactly hurting for money, and it's not like you have anyone else to spend it on. Your legal career is over, but we're still building ours." The callousness of his response left me momentarily speechless, a cold emptiness spreading in my chest at his cruel assessment of my worth. Elizabeth, perhaps sensing she was losing control of the situation, tried a different approach. "Mom, we're family. We've always been there for you." Her voice softened artificially. "Remember when you had that fall last year? Who drove you to the hospital?" "You did," I acknowledged, "after I called you 3 times. And you complained the entire way about missing your hair appointment." The memory still stung. Elizabeth flushed, unable to deny it. Nathan stepped forward, his voice dropping to that persuasive tone he used on clients. Marie, you have to understand our position. We've built a life based on certain financial expectations. You can't just pull the rug out from under us. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw clearly for the first time the calculating man behind the charming facade. A chill ran down my spine as I recognized the predatory gleam in his eyes. I'm not pulling any rug, Nathan, I replied, my voice cool and steady. I'm simply closing my checkbook. And what about our mortgage? He demanded. Our lifestyle? That sounds like a problem for you to solve, I stated, standing up to signal the conversation was over. Now, unless you're here to thank me for the $127,000 I've already given you, I think you should leave. Nathan's face darkened, his mask slipping completely. You'll regret this, Marie. You're not as independent as you think. Your legal knowledge won't help you when you need care. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud as I showed them to the door, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. As I closed it behind them, I realized my hands were steady, my heartbeat calm. The old Marie would have been distraught, desperate to mend fences at any cost. But the woman who stood in the quiet house listening to their car peel angrily out of the driveway was no longer afraid of their disapproval. She was too busy rediscovering her dignity and remembering the attorney she once was. The weeks following my confrontation with Elizabeth and Nathan brought an icy silence I hadn't experienced since my husband's death. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits demanding money. According to Thomas, they were regrouping, which I took to mean plotting their next strategy. I used the quiet to reclaim my life, drawing on strengths I'd forgotten I possessed. First, I met with Samantha Reed, an elder law attorney recommended by Jasmine. At 54, she was a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for protecting seniors' rights. She listened to my story without judgment, her fingers steepled thoughtfully. Unfortunately, what you're describing is quite common, she said, her voice matter-of-fact. Family financial exploitation of seniors is widespread, especially when there's a substantial retirement account involved. I wouldn't call it exploitation exactly, I started, then stopped myself. That was the old Marie talking, making excuses, minimizing the hurt despite my legal background that should have recognized the situation for what it was. Samantha's eyes softened with understanding. Marie, if someone else told you this story about a widow whose daughter and son-in-law took $127,000 from her and then mocked her behind her back, what would you call it? I swallowed hard, the truth difficult to acknowledge. Exploitation. Exactly, she nodded. And it rarely stops on its own. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. Let's talk about protecting your assets. As a former attorney yourself, you'll understand that prevention is our best strategy here. By the end of our meeting, I had a clear plan revising my will, setting up a trust with Thomas as co-trustee, and creating financial power of attorney documents that explicitly excluded Elizabeth and Nathan from making decisions for me. I felt a sense of professional satisfaction at tackling the problem head-on. What about my house? I asked. It's the most valuable thing I own. Samantha nodded approvingly at my question. We can place it in the trust as well. That way, no one can pressure you to sell it or take out loans against it. I've seen too many cases where seniors are persuaded to mortgage their homes to help family members. As I left her office, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, my posture straightening with every step. For years, I'd carried the burden of keeping Elizabeth and Nathan afloat. Now I was taking steps to protect myself. Not just my money, but my dignity and the future I'd worked hard to secure. I decided to redirect my energy to things that brought me joy and drew on my strengths. The community garden project had been languishing on my to-do list for months. With newfound resolve, I called the coordinator and volunteered to head the herb garden committee. Marie, we'd love to have you, she exclaimed, genuine warmth in her voice. We meet Thursdays at the community centre. Actually, we could use your legal expertise on a land use issue we're facing. That Thursday, I found myself surrounded by a group of enthusiastic gardeners, all eager to transform an abandoned lot into a space where the community could grow food together. The energy in the room was infectious, filling me with purpose. I'm thinking lavender along the southern edge, I suggested during the planning session, feeling myself come alive with ideas. It's drought-resistant and attracts pollinators. Brilliant idea, said William, a retired botanist with kind eyes and a ready smile. I have some seedlings I could contribute. The microclimate in that corner would be perfect for Mediterranean herbs. For 2 hours, we plotted and planned, my expertise in medicinal herbs proving unexpectedly valuable. I found myself discussing the legal aspects of the land trust with the committee chair, my old skills resurfacing naturally. By the time we broke for coffee, I felt more useful and engaged than I had in years. "You certainly know your plants," William commented as he handed me a cup, his eyes warm with appreciation. "My husband and I used to grow everything ourselves," I explained, accepting the coffee gratefully. "After he died, I kept it up. It connects me to him somehow. And I find the methodical nature of gardening similar to preparing a case." William nodded understandingly. "My Margaret passed 5 years ago. The garden was our thing too. There's something healing about nurturing living things, isn't there?" We chatted easily, discovering shared interests beyond gardening, classic films, jazz music, traveling. My heart felt lighter than it had in months as we discussed composers and film directors, his knowledge complementing mine in unexpected ways. For the first time in ages, I was having a conversation that didn't revolve around someone else's problems or needs. I was being seen and valued for my knowledge and insights, not just as a source of financial support. As weeks passed, my involvement with the garden project deepened. I donated herbs from my own garden, helped secure a small grant for irrigation equipment by drawing on my legal skills to draft the proposal, and found myself looking forward to the Thursday meetings with an enthusiasm I hadn't felt in a long time. William often walked me to my car afterward, our conversations stretching longer each week, exploring ideas and sharing stories that revealed our similar values despite different professional backgrounds. One evening, my phone rang unexpectedly. Elizabeth's name flashed on the screen, sending a jolt of anxiety through me. I took a deep breath before answering, centering myself. "Mom?" Her voice was softer than the last time we'd spoken, almost conciliatory. "How are you?" "I'm well, thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "How are you?" "We're managing," she said with a calculated sigh. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. Nathan and I have been talking, and we think it's time we all sat down together. We'd like to invite you to dinner on Saturday." I hesitated, suspicion immediately rising. This sudden olive branch seemed suspicious after weeks of silence. "Just dinner, Mom," Elizabeth continued, her voice taking on that persuasive quality I knew so well. A chance to clear the air. No pressure, no agenda. But I knew my daughter. There was always an agenda, always a strategy behind her actions. "Who else will be there?" I asked carefully. "Just us," she assured me. "We thought it should be intimate, family only." I thought about Samantha's warnings about continued manipulation attempts. I thought about the $127,000 already gone. I thought about ATM with outdated legal knowledge. My instincts as both a mother and a former attorney were on high alert. "I'd be happy to come to dinner," I said finally, my curiosity winning out. I wanted to see their next move. Elizabeth exhaled audibly, relief evident in her voice. "Wonderful. 7 o'clock. Nathan is making his famous roast chicken." After hanging up, I sat quietly considering the invitation, analysing it as I would have a legal problem. This wasn't a peace offering. It was a tactical move. They'd had time to realise that angry confrontations wouldn't work, so now they were shifting to a gentler approach. The goal remained the same: access to my money. I called Thomas to get his perspective, my trust in his judgment growing stronger. "They invited you to dinner," he said, sounding surprised. "That's interesting timing." "What do you mean?" I asked, detecting something in his tone. "Well," he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I probably shouldn't say anything, but Nathan's been having some issues at work. The promotion isn't going as smoothly as he expected, and their mortgage company sent a notice about late payments." I absorbed this information, the pieces falling into place with crystal clarity. Of course they wanted to clear the air now. They needed me again. My financial support had become critical to maintaining their lifestyle. "I told Elizabeth I'd come," I said, already formulating my approach. "Are you sure that's a good idea, Mom?" Thomas asked, concern evident in his voice. "Yes," I said firmly, feeling more confident than I had in years. "But I'll be going in with my eyes wide open and my legal instincts on alert." The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully in a deep blue blouse and black slacks, elegant but not trying too hard. I brought a bottle of wine. Not the expensive kind I would have chosen before, but a respectable mid-range selection. My choices were deliberate, a statement about our new relationship. As I drove to their home, the beautiful colonial with the mortgage I'd been paying, I felt oddly calm, centered in my own power. The old Marie would have been anxious. desperate to smooth things over at any cost. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who knew her own worth and had legal strategies at her disposal. I parked in the driveway, noticing how immaculate the landscaping looked. The garden emergency I'd funded last spring had certainly yielded beautiful results, the flowering shrubs perfectly manicured. Elizabeth opened the door before I could ring the bell, greeting me with an enthusiastic hug that felt rehearsed. "Mom, you look wonderful. Come in, come in." Nathan appeared in the hallway, all smiles and charm as if our last encounter had never happened. "Marie, so good to see you. Can I take your coat? That wine looks delicious." I handed him the bottle, meeting his gaze steadily. His smile faltered slightly before he recovered, a flash of something calculating in his eyes. "Dinner's almost ready. Why don't we have a drink in the living room first?" I followed them into their perfectly appointed living room, noting the new furniture, likely the sunroom pieces Elizabeth had mentioned during our argument. Everything screamed expensive taste and financial overextension. I sat on the edge of the sofa, declining Nathan's offer of a cocktail in favor of water. "So," I said pleasantly, getting straight to the point, "you wanted to clear the air?" Elizabeth and Nathan exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. The trap was set. Now it was time to see if I would walk into it willingly, or if I had finally learned to recognize the bait. Nathan cleared his throat, setting his wineglass down with calculated precision. "Marie, we've had some time to reflect on everything that's happened." "Yes," Elizabeth chimed in, her voice honeyed with false sincerity. "We realize there's been a breakdown in communication." I sipped my water, waiting, my legal training helping me recognize their setup. Years of experience in courtrooms had taught me that when a witness volunteers information like this, they're usually setting up a story. "The truth is," Nathan continued, leaning forward with practiced earnestness, "we never fully expressed our gratitude for your help with the mortgage. That was wrong of us." "It was," I agreed calmly. My simple acknowledgement seemed to throw him off script momentarily. He glanced at Elizabeth, who smoothly took over. "Mom, family supports each other," she said, her rehearsed speech continuing. "That's what you always taught us. And yes, maybe we've relied on your generosity too much, but we're working on becoming more independent." "I'm glad to hear that," I replied neutrally. Nathan nodded, his confidence returning as they moved through their planned dialogue. "Exactly. And that's why we wanted to have this dinner, to show you we're taking responsibility." The oven timer chimed, and Elizabeth excused herself to check on dinner. Nathan immediately shifted closer to me on the sofa, his voice dropping conspiratorially. "Marie, between us," he lowered his voice. "Elizabeth has been devastated by this rift. She cries at night, worried she's lost her mother." I met his gaze steadily, not allowing myself to be manipulated by this obvious appeal to emotion. How terrible for her. "The thing is," he continued, not registering my lack of emotional response, "we've hit a bit of a rough patch, just temporary. Of course, the new position is fantastic, but the bonus structure is quarterly rather than monthly. It's created a short-term cash flow issue." There it was. The real reason for the dinner invitation slipped in as casually as possible. My suspicions confirmed. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction at having predicted their strategy so accurately. "What about your savings?" I asked innocently, as if I were genuinely concerned. Nathan's expression flickered, a momentary break in his mask. "Well, with the economy the way it is, investments haven't performed as expected." "And the vacation to Tuscany, did that impact your finances?" I pressed, watching him closely. His eyes narrowed slightly, annoyance flashing across his face. "Elizabeth mentioned that, did she?" "She did," I confirmed, maintaining my calm demeanor. Elizabeth returned, announcing dinner was ready. We moved to the dining room where she'd prepared an elaborate table setting, my grandmother's china, which I'd given her years ago, gleaming under candlelight. Another reminder of my generosity. "Wine, Mom?" Elizabeth offered, already pouring. "No, thank you. I'm driving," I declined firmly. "You could always stay over," she suggested, her voice light but intent clear. "We could have a nice breakfast tomorrow, keep talking things through." I smiled, feeling unexpectedly powerful in my refusal. "That's thoughtful, but I have plans in the morning." "Oh." Elizabeth looked genuinely surprised that I might have a life beyond their needs. "What plans?" "I've joined the Community Garden Committee," I explained. "We're preparing the herb beds tomorrow, and I'm helping draft a land use agreement for the property." Nathan served the roast chicken, which was admittedly delicious. As we ate, Elizabeth steered the conversation to neutral topics. Thomas's teaching position, an upcoming family wedding, neighborhood gossip. It was almost like old times except for the undercurrent of tension and calculation I could now clearly perceive. After dinner, as Elizabeth cleared the plates, Nathan disappeared briefly, returning with a folder. My legal instincts immediately went on alert, recognizing the setup for what it was. "Marie," he began, setting the folder on the table with an air of authority. "We've been thinking about your financial situation." "My financial situation is just fine, thank you," I replied coolly. He pushed forward undeterred. "We've worked up some numbers looking at your retirement funds, your projected expenses, and what you could reasonably contribute to the family without impacting your lifestyle." I stared at him, astonished by his audacity despite having anticipated this move. "You did what?" Elizabeth quickly rejoined us, placing a hand on my arm in a gesture meant to be soothing. "Mom, we're just trying to help. We know money management can be overwhelming at your age, even with your legal background." I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. "I'm 67, not 97, and I have a financial advisor who helps me manage my money quite competently. My legal training hasn't abandoned me either." Nathan opened the folder, revealing spreadsheets and charts. "According to our calculations, you could easily contribute $2,000 monthly without affecting your standard of living. That's less than before, you'll note." The sheer presumption took my breath away. They weren't even pretending this dinner was about reconciliation anymore. It was a financial negotiation, and they expected me to capitulate. "And this would be for family support," Elizabeth said quickly, her eyes bright with eagerness. "Not just the mortgage, but medical expenses, education funds for future grandchildren, family vacations, investments in our shared future." I looked from one expectant face to the other, a calm clarity settling over me like a protective mantle. "No," Nathan blinked, confusion crossing his face. "Excuse me, no," I repeated, folding my napkin neatly. "I will not be contributing $2,000 monthly or any other amount to your household." Elizabeth's facade cracked, her composed expression crumbling. "Mom, be reasonable. We've worked so hard on this plan." "I can see that," I replied, gesturing to the folder with its elaborate calculations. "But my answer is still no." Nathan's charm vanished entirely, replaced by cold anger. "This is the thanks we get after we've welcomed you into our home, included you in our lives." "Included me?" I raised an eyebrow skeptically. "You mean like when you publicly humiliated me at your promotion party, or when you called me an ATM with outdated legal knowledge behind my back?" "That was a joke," he protested, though his eyes shifted away guiltily. "No, Nathan," I stated firmly. "A joke is something everyone can laugh at. What you did was mockery at the expense of someone who had given you $127,000. Elizabeth's eyes widened. "It wasn't that much." "It was exactly that much," I countered. "I have the records verified by my financial advisor. Every dollar is accounted for." Nathan's face hardened into a mask of contempt. "You've always been stubborn, Marie. Always keeping score, counting every penny. No wonder John worked himself into an early grave. Living with someone so rigid must have been exhausting." The mention of my late husband twisted into a weapon should have wounded me deeply. Instead, I felt a strange sense of liberation, as if John's spirit was beside me, strengthening my resolve. "You didn't know John," I said quietly. "He valued integrity above all else." I stood up, my decision made. "Thank you for dinner." It was illuminating. Elizabeth jumped up, panic flaring in her eyes. "You're leaving? Just like that?" "Yes, just like that," I confirmed. "What about family?" she demanded, tears welling dramatically. "What about loyalty?" "I've been loyal for years," I said gently but firmly. "I've supported you financially, emotionally, in every way a mother could. But loyalty goes both ways, Elizabeth, and respect is non-negotiable." Nathan snorted dismissively. "Great speech, very dramatic. What happens when you need us? When you're older, frailer, unable to care for yourself? Your legal expertise won't help you then." I met his gaze squarely, refusing to be intimidated. "I'll manage, just as I've always managed. The law protects seniors better than you might think." Elizabeth followed me to the door, her composure crumbling entirely. "Mom, please. We can work something out. A smaller amount, maybe. Or just occasional help." I turned to face my daughter one last time, seeing clearly the manipulation behind her tears. "Elizabeth, I will always love you. My door is always open if you want to visit as family, not as financial dependents. But both the law office of Marie and the bank of Marie are permanently closed." I left them standing in the doorway, Elizabeth crying theatrically. Nathan's face darkened with fury. As I drove away, I felt no sadness, only the peaceful certainty that I had finally done the right thing, reclaiming both my dignity and my professional judgment. 6 months later, I stood in the community garden surveying the flourishing herb beds with pride. Lavender, rosemary, thyme, and mint created a tapestry of colours and scents that attracted butterflies and bees by the dozens. The land use agreement I'd helped draft had secured the garden's future for years to come. "It's magnificent," William said beside me, his hand warm on my shoulder. Over the months, our friendship had deepened into something more: companionship, support, and eventually a gentle romance that had taken us both by surprise. "The children's section loves your mint," he continued, his eyes crinkling with pleasure. "The teacher said they can't stop rubbing the leaves and smelling their fingers." I smiled, feeling a rush of warmth at the memory of Elizabeth doing the same thing in my garden as a child. The thought brought a familiar pang, but no longer the sharp grief of before, just a bittersweet acknowledgement of what was lost and what remained. My phone buzzed with a text message from Thomas, all set for lunch tomorrow. Sophie can't wait to see her grandma. I typed back a quick confirmation, my heart lighter. My relationship with my son had strengthened over the past months, as he'd seen me stand my ground. He'd even begun bringing his daughter Sophie for regular visits, our bond growing stronger through genuine connection rather than financial obligation. Elizabeth and Nathan had finally sold their too expensive house, downsizing to something within their actual means. We spoke occasionally, our conversations stilted but civil. Elizabeth carefully avoided any mention of money, and I respected her enough not to bring it up. It wasn't the close relationship I'd once hoped for, but it was honest, and that was worth more than false harmony built on exploitation. "Penny for your thoughts?" William asked, his voice gentle. "Just reflecting on how much has changed since that dinner party," I replied, leaning slightly into his solid presence. "How much I've changed." He nodded understandingly. William knew my story. I'd shared it one evening over tea in his garden. Rather than judgment, he'd offered perspective born from his own experiences. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for others is to stop enabling them. My Margaret taught me that. As we walked through the garden, greeting other volunteers and community members, I felt a deep contentment settle in my bones. My retirement fund was secure, growing modestly under Jasmine's watchful eye. My house was protected in the trust Samantha had established. My days were filled with purpose and genuine connections that valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. That terrible moment at Nathan's promotion party, standing frozen in the spotlight while strangers laughed, had been a gift in disguise. It had forced me to see what I'd been blind to for years, that true dignity comes not from what we give others, but from what we refuse to surrender. As William and I left the garden hand in hand, planning our dinner and an evening of jazz at the local music venue, I realized I was happier at 67 than I'd been in years. Not because I had more, but because I had finally recognized my own worth. The Bank of Marie was closed forever. My legal instincts had returned in full force. And Marie herself, she was flourishing,